Instead of a hello, her son-in-law snapped. "What do you want? My mama warned me that after the wedding, your country relatives would start showing up asking for money." In response, the bride's father slowly removed his coat and put the rude young man in his place. "I actually bought this condo for my daughter. So why is some parasite taking up space in it?" Maya Calloway had been flitting around the tiny sun-drenched kitchen since early morning. The light pouring through the single-picture window reflected off the white glossy cabinet fronts that she and Devon Reed had spent so long choosing, arguing over shades and hardware. Back then it had seemed so important. Now she couldn't care less whether the handles were curved, matte, or chrome. She just wished they weren't sticky from her mother-in-law's touch. The kitchen, their 75-square-foot pride and joy, had become a battleground where every inch of counter space was a strategic height. Today Maya had successfully reclaimed it all. In the oven bought on credit during the last Black Friday sale, a sweet potato pie was already turning golden, releasing that comforting homemade aroma that her father, Mr. Calloway, could smell all the way down the hall. On the stovetop, a big enameled pot adorned with faded daisies, gently bubbled with collard greens, cooked low and slow in a rich smoked turkey broth, just the way her dad Marcus liked it. Maya leaned over the pot, inhaled the savory steam and smiled. Her parents were coming today. It was the first time they'd come since the wedding to celebrate, albeit late, bring gifts and most importantly see how their only daughter was living. She wanted them to see the perfect picture. A happy wife, a cozy nest, a content son-in-law. But the picture desperately refused to come together. From the main room, separated from the kitchen by a narrow hallway, came the familiar drone of the television. It was the soundtrack to their new life. An endless stream of political talk shows and daytime court dramas that Ms. Vivian Reed, Devon's mother, switched on first thing in the morning and turned off only late at night. There on their new, still smelling of the store sofa, perched her mother-in-law, her thin legs tucked beneath her, wearing her perpetually slipping woolen socks. She had been living with them for 3 months now. She had arrived just for a week to help the newlyweds until I finalized my condo exchange. That week had stretched out like an old unraveling sweater, turning first into a month and then into an entire quarter. Miss Vivian's plan to exchange her condo in a far-out suburb of Augusta, Georgia, was like the Great Wall of China, an undeniable yet utterly incomprehensible fact. It was supposedly happening somewhere, but no results were ever seen. The realtor was allegedly slow, the buyers were fussy, and the paperwork was treacherous. The mother-in-law's presence had turned their 430-feet one-bedroom studio into an electrified space where the air crackled with unspoken resentment. The spacious room, by the standards of an economical-class new build, had shrunk and compacted. The sofa was no longer a place for evening cuddles with her husband. It was Miss Vivian's throne. The kitchen table, where they once had candle-lit dinners, became a staging ground for her monologues about the burdens of life. Devon, her darling, her only son, seemed not to notice any of it. He navigated the sharp corners of this painful triangle with ease, gliding around the tension like an expert skier weaving through slalom flags. His mother's sighs about Maya's extravagance. "Oh, avocado. When I was young we gnawed on carrots and our teeth were stronger." Her snide comments about dust on the bookshelf. "I'd wipe it, but my height is not what it used to be. I just can't reach." And the nightly sermons about how a proper wife meets her husband with a hot 3-course dinner, not reheated leftovers. He dismissed all of it as old school and motherly concern. "Babe, come on. Mom just means." "Well," he would say, kissing the top of her head before burying his face back in his phone. Maya endured it. At first, she truly believed it was a period of adjustment, that 3 women with different habits sharing one territory was complicated chemistry that required time to stabilize. She smiled, nodded, swallowed her resentment with her morning coffee, and told herself that everything would soon be fine. Miss Vivian would move out to her new exchanged condo, and she and Devon would be alone again. But the days passed and the mother-in-law's suitcase, shoved behind the closet, seemed to have taken root in their laminate flooring. Ma set the table, laying out new plates she had bought especially for her parents' visit, white with a thin blue rim. She pictured how her dad would give an approving grunt, and how her mom would praise her good taste. Just then Miss Vivian emerged from the room. She was wearing her perpetual small flowered housecoat, which made her thin frame look even more ethereal and frail. She stopped in the doorway, surveyed the table with a sharp gaze, and her thin lips pressed into the familiar line of disapproval. New dishes. Very pretty, she uttered, her voice devoid of any warmth. Expensive, I bet. Back in my day, we were given dinner sets for our wedding that lasted a lifetime. And now just constant spending money down the drain. She sighed so heavily, it was as if the entire burden of Maya and Devon's mortgage rested on her shoulders. And their mortgage was substantial. They paid $2,800 a month. With Maya's marketing salary of $75,000 a year and Devon's project manager salary of $125,000, it was tight. They saved almost nothing, living paycheck to paycheck, thrilled if they had even $2,000 left on the card by the end of the month. It wasn't expensive, Miss Vivian. I got them on sale, Maya replied peaceably, arranging the napkins. She knew any explanation would be used against her. Sale. These capitalists always have a sale. The mother-in-law grumbled, walking over to the refrigerator. She opened it like an auditor. Oh, moldy cheese again. Honey, that's pure poison. Throwing money away. It's gorgonzola. Maya repeated tiredly, probably for the 10th time in 3 months. It's a special noble mold. Noble poison, Miss Vivian snapped, slamming the door shut in disgust. We ate good old age cheddar when I was young, and nobody complained. We're all alive and healthy. She retreated to the room and a second later, the television volume cranked up again, cutting the kitchen off from the rest of the world. Maya was left alone amidst her sparkling clean kitchen, the festive mood slowly dissipating like steam from the pot lid. She felt like a set designer in someone else's play. The stage was set, clean condo, delicious food. But the drama would be performed according to someone else's script. Devon woke up closer to 11. He shuffled into the kitchen, sleepy and tousled, rubbed his eyes and hugged Maya from behind, burying his nose in her hair. Smells so good. You're the best, he murmured. For a second, Mia thought everything was fine, just a bad dream. She turned to him, ready to smile, but saw his gaze drift towards the room where the television droned, and his expression subtly changed. The carelessness vanished, replaced by his usual worried look. Has Mom had breakfast yet? He asked. It was his first question every morning. Not yet, Maya said. No appetite. Her blood pressure is acting up. Maya knew this script by heart. Her mother-in-law's blood pressure only acted up on days when Maya planned something nice for herself or for her and Devon. I should get her a new blood pressure monitor. An electric one. That old thing is probably faulty, Devon said thoughtfully, looking into his coffee cup. We bought one last week, Maya reminded him quietly. Oh right. Okay. Well, maybe the medicine isn't working, he waved the thought away. All right. What's the plan? What time are your folks coming? They promised by 3. Maya took the plunge. She had rehearsed the sentence all night, choosing her words carefully so as not to sound like a shrew. Listen, has Miss Vivian said exactly when there will be news about her condo? I mean, with my parents coming, it will be really crowded. Maybe it would be better for her to. He cut her off instantly. His face hardened, his brows knitted together. Babe, we've talked about this. Are you starting again? Mom is doing everything she can. Do you think she enjoys being cooped up in our little corner? She's used to space. These are temporary difficulties. She's going through a tough time. We need to support her, not try to push her out. Every word was a small jab. I'm not trying to push her out. Maya's voice trembled. I just want a little privacy. We've been married for 6 months and we haven't had a single evening alone. Miss Vivian sleeps in the bedroom and we're on an air mattress in the kitchen. That's not normal. What's not normal about helping your mother? His voice rose. My mother is a wise woman. She dedicated her life to me. She has no one but me. We just need to hang tight. Everything will be fine. She'll move out. She's not going anywhere. What is with all this selfishness? Selfishness. The word hit Maya hard. Wanting to live with her own husband in her own condo was apparently selfishness. She looked at Devon, at his handsome but now alien face, and realized she was talking to a wall, or worse, to a repeater. All those phrases, wise woman dedicated her life, just need to hang tight. She had heard them from Miss Vivian dozens of times in different variations. Devon had simply absorbed them and was now delivering them as his own thoughts. Fine, she said dully. I get it. Let's not talk about it. She turned to the sink and began aggressively scrubbing an already clean plate. Devon stood behind her for another minute, sighed heavily, showing how tired he was of these meaningless arguments, and left the room. A second later, Mia heard his muffled voice, and in response, the mother-in-law's pitiful, wavering tones. The instruction was underway. Preparation for the arrival of the enemy forces in the form of the in-laws. Maya wanted to smash the plate against the wall, but she didn't. She carefully placed it in the drying rack and went to the bathroom. She turned the water on full blast to drown out the sounds from the room, braced her hands against the sink, and looked at her reflection in the mirror. Staring back was an exhausted 30-year-old woman with dark circles under her eyes. The picture of the happy wife was tearing at the seams. After lunch, Miss Vivian decided to help. Her help was always worse than sabotage. She volunteered to dust and of course accidentally knocked a small porcelain ballerina off the shelf, a gift from Maya's childhood friend. The figurine shattered into tiny pieces. "Oh, my old clumsy hands," the mother-in-law lamented, wringing them sorrowfully. Such poor taste, of course, but a shame all the same. Maya silently swept up the fragments. Arguing was pointless. Trying to explain that the figurine was a treasured memory was equally futile. Any value she placed on anything was instantly devalued and mocked. Next, Miss Vivian moved on to rearranging the kitchen. She decided that dry goods shouldn't be on the bottom shelf, but on the top because of dampness rising from the floor. Mia's arguments that they were on the 22nd floor, and there was no dampness, were ignored. Ultimately, jars of rice, beans, and sugar were moved to the most inconvenient shelf near the ceiling where Maya, who stood at 5 feet 5 inches, could only reach them by climbing onto a step stool. "There, that's order," the mother-in-law declared smugly, surveying the fruits of her labor. Before, it was just a mess. Maya felt a dull, helpless rage brewing inside her. These weren't just trivial household matters. This was a systematic, methodical occupation of her territory, her life. Miss Vivian wasn't just living with them. She was reshaping their world to fit hers, erasing Mia's habits, tastes, and rules. And the most terrifying part was that her own husband was a passive accomplice. That evening, when Devon returned from work, Maya tried one last time. She decided to approach it from a different angle. "Tim," she began using his nickname. "Listen, I just checked our online bank to pay for the groceries, and there's a $300 withdrawal. Mom's medication," he said immediately. "We agreed we discuss amounts like that," she tried to say calmly without accusation, but Devon heard one anyway. He pulled her into the hall away from the room and hissed, his breath smelling of stale office coffee and annoyance. "Are you spying on me? Checking my spending? That is my mother, Maya. She needed injections for her heart. Do you have no conscience? Is $300 for your mother-in-law's health such a big deal to you?" "It's not the amount, it's what we agreed on," she started. But he cut her off. "What did we agree on? Splitting every penny? I work. I earn more than you. And I will help my mother as much as I see fit. You don't get to lecture me." Just then, the room door cracked open, and Miss Vivian's woeful face appeared in the gap. "Devon, sweetie, please don't argue because of me. The old woman, I'll give it all back when I get my pension." Her voice trembled with restrained tears. "I didn't know I was such a burden to my little Maya. I can go clean floors in the lobby. I'll get a side job." It was a masterful below-the-belt hit. Now Maya looked not just like a petty wife, but a monster ready to throw her sick mother-in-law out onto the street over a measly $300. Devon shot Mia a scorching, reproachful look and rushed into the room to comfort his poor mother. Maya remained standing in the dimly lit hallway. The lump in her throat was so thick it was hard to breathe. She realized she had lost not just this battle, but the entire war before it had even begun. She was a stranger in this house in her own condo, the one her father had bought. The thought burned her. Yes, the condo was formerly hers in Devon. They had married and he was on the deed, but the very substantial down payment, almost half the cost, had come from her father. Marcus had sold the old family farm in rural South Carolina to make sure his daughter had her own place in the city. "A gift," he had simply said then, handing her the envelope with the money. "So you stand firm on your own 2 feet." She and Devon had taken out the mortgage for the remaining amount, and Maya, fool that she was, had decided it would be fairer to put the condo in both their names. What a naive, trusting fool she had been. She had believed in love, in family, in us. But it turned out there was us, her and Devon. And then there was them, Devon and his mother. And those two groups almost never overlapped. She went into the kitchen, sat down at the table, which was set for tomorrow's celebration, and buried her head in her hands. The pie, cooling in the oven, no longer smelled of comfort. It smelled of dashed hopes. The plates with the blue rim looked like a mockery. She sat there for a long time, not turning on the light, listening to the muffled voices from the room. Devon's soothing murmur and his mother's quiet plaintive sniffles. They were a team. She was an obstruction. Suddenly she remembered one more detail. When Miss Vivian first moved in, she often talked on the phone with her sister, Aunt Carol, and once Maya, walking past, overheard a fragment of a sentence. Otherwise, I would have had to rent it out to some low-rent tenants for pennies. Miss Vivian was talking about her condo renting, but she was supposed to be exchanging it. Why rent out a condo that you were selling as part of a complex deal? Maya hadn't paid attention then, but now the phrase dug into her memory like a splinter. She stood up, poured herself a glass of cold water, and drank it in one go. Chilled her. Something was wrong here. Very wrong. The story about the exchange was tearing at the seams, just like her marriage. She went to the window and looked out at the night city of Atlanta. Millions of lights, millions of lives. And in one of those illuminated boxes sat she, trapped by her own trust. Tomorrow her parents would arrive. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid they would leave. She was afraid of what they would see, the life their daughter had fallen into. The morning greeted Maya with the same eerie silence you find in hospital hallways after lights out. Everyone seems to be sleeping, but the air buzzes with someone else's pain and restrained anxiety. The humiliating and cold scene in the hallway last night wouldn't let her go. She had slept curled up on the air mattress in the kitchen, and even in her sleep, she felt as if she were lying in a hallway where anyone could pass by and kick her. Devon hadn't come out. He had stayed in the room, probably on the sofa next to his comforted and victorious mother. Now those 430 square feet of condo felt like enemy territory, occupied and inaccessible. She woke long before the alarm with a heavy feeling in her chest as if a concrete slab had been placed on her sternum. But then she remembered. My parents are coming today. The thought, instead of bringing joy, brought a fresh wave of anxiety. She had to gather her strength and play the happy family life act until the end. She silently got up, trying not to squeak the mattress, and tiptoed into the bathroom. The cold tile shocked her feet. She stared at herself in the mirror for a long time at the pale face, the dark shadows under her eyes. You don't greet parents you haven't seen in months with a face like that. She turned the water colder and began washing her face almost furiously, rubbing her cheeks to bring some color back. She needed to create the illusion of life and prosperity. Back in the kitchen, the first thing she checked was the pie. It stood in the cool oven, perfect and golden brown, but it felt alien to her, like a prop from a theatrical production. She put the coffee on to brew, and its aroma, usually so invigorating, only emphasized the falsehood of this morning. Breakfast passed in oppressive silence. Devon came out of the room, his face puffy and his eyes guilty. He tried to hug Ma, but she instinctively pulled away, pretending she needed to grab something from a cabinet. He took the hint and stepped back, sighing heavily. Miss Vivian appeared next, already in full battle gear. The same house coat, the same sorrowful look, but a thinly veiled triumph in her eyes. She sat down at the table and conspicuously pushed away the plate of cream cheese pastries Maya offered. No thank you, sweet Ma. I don't feel like eating. Can't swallow a thing, she said in a quiet, suffering voice, casting a quick glance at her son. Devon immediately tensed up. His internal poor mom is in danger. Radar was flawless. Mom, what's wrong? Is it your heart again? He asked solicitously, pulling his chair closer. No, son. My heart is used to it. It's hardened. She sighed again, this time even more tragically. It's those wicked thoughts keeping me awake. All about my condo exchange. It's falling apart again. Maya froze with a mug in her hand. Here we go. She knew this spectacle had a sequel, and here was the first act. She kept staring into her mug, turning into an ear. Falling apart? How? Devon's voice was sharp. Is that realtor messing around again? What's the realtor got to do with it? He's just doing his job. Ms. Vivian waved her hand dismissively. My buyers showed up, good people, and we agreed on everything. But the condo I was looking at for myself, that 2-bedroom place in Stockbridge, the owner raised the price at the last minute, said, "Inflation. Everything's getting expensive." She's asking for $15,000 more. Where am I going to get it, son? Where? Tears rang in her voice. She pulled a tissue from her housecoat pocket and dabbed at her dry eyes. Maya silently scoffed. $15,000. What a convenient round number. Not $1 million to scare them off immediately, but not $1,000 either, which wouldn't justify a tragedy. An amount calculated to induce guilt and prompt action. She recalled the overheard phone snippet about renting to low-rent tenants. What sale? What owner in Stockbridge? It was all a lie from the first to the last word. A crude but effective theatrical performance for an audience of one. Her husband. Mom, don't cry. Devon put his arm around her shoulders. We'll figure something out. Cloths. No domestic sense whatsoever. I told Devon right from the start. She's a city softie. She's no good. Stop. Maya couldn't take it anymore, raising her voice. Stop what? You don't want to hear the truth? Miss Vivian was shouting now, gesticulating wildly. She was in a rage. Just at that moment, Devon walked into the kitchen. He was in a t-shirt just off the phone. He saw his flushed, angry wife and his mother pressing a hand to her heart with a look of agony. The scene was clear. "Devon, sweetie," Miss Vivian wailed, instantly shifting register to the victim. "I just gave her some advice. I wanted to help. And my little Maya pounced on me, yelling, saying, 'I'm a nobody here.'" Devon turned his heavy gaze to Maya. A look that promised nothing good. "Maya, what is going on here? Why are you shouting at Mom? She is insulting me and my parents." Maya shot back. She was shaking with indignation and injustice. "I didn't hear any insults. I heard you shouting." He snapped. "Mom is just worried about us and you take everything the wrong way. You're always unhappy. You put out your tablecloth. Fine. Good for you. Why turn it into a tragedy and give Mom a panic attack?" Maya looked at him and the world narrowed to his face and this kitchen. He hadn't just failed to defend her. He had accused her. He had sided with his mother unconditionally without even trying to understand. Each word was like a slap. In that moment she felt for the first time clearly and distinctly that she was an outsider, totally and utterly alienated in this house next to this man. She was not a part of the family. She was a bothersome interference in the perfect relationship between mother and son. She slowly surveyed the kitchen, the shining cabinet fronts, the pie in the oven, the festive table. It was all a sham, a set piece for a drama in which she was cast as the villain. She said nothing, turned silently, and went to the bathroom, the only remaining patch of personal territory, locked the door, sat on the edge of the tub, and only then allowed herself to weep silently, bitterly, swallowing the tears that burned her throat. These weren't tears of offense. They were tears of realization. She was crying for her love, her hopes, and the naive girl who believed us meant forever. She stayed in the bathroom for about half an hour cleaning herself up. When she emerged, the condo was silent. Miss Vivian was in the room watching TV. Devon was sitting at his computer pretending to work. The table in the kitchen remained set with the tablecloth. No one had dared to remove it. It was a small, pathetic victory that brought no satisfaction. There was an hour left until her parents arrived. Maya realized she had to make one final attempt, not for herself. She had already made up her mind about herself, but for them, for her parents, so that their evening wouldn't be completely ruined. She approached Devon from behind and placed a hand on his shoulder. He flinched but didn't turn around. "Tim," she began quietly and evenly without tears or hysterics. "I'm asking you, please. My parents will be here soon. This is our family celebration, our first. I'm asking you, please. Can Miss Vivian? Well, can she at least just sit with us at the table as a guest today? Not interfere, not comment, not give advice. Can you ask her?" He slowly turned his head. There was cold fury in his eyes. He had learned the morning and afternoon lessons perfectly. "So you want me to tell my mother? Mom, sit down and shut up because my wife's family is coming over. Is that it?" His voice was filled with sarcasm. "You've completely lost respect for your elders. My mother is a wise woman, Maya. She doesn't give bad advice, and if she says something, it's only because she's worried about our family, about our budget, which you spend so carelessly. He was speaking foreign words. Every phrase was charged by Miss Vivian. Maya saw before her not her husband, but a puppet faithfully repeating a learned script. She's scared, he continued raging, that your family will come and start turning you against me. Again telling you I'm not worthy of you, that the condo isn't mine. They were against our marriage from the beginning. This was an outright lie. Her parents had welcomed Devon warmly and graciously. Her father had shaken his hand man to man. Her mother had fussed over him, offering the best dishes. But now, in the distorted world created by Miss Vivian, they had become enemies. Devon, that's not true and you know it, Maya said softly. I only know that my mother has gone gray because of you over the past 3 months. She was mistress of her own house, and here she has to adjust to your whims. This isn't right for her. That isn't right for her. And now you want to muzzle her in front of your family. He stood up, towering over her. So listen to me. My mother will behave however she sees fit. This is her house too as long as she lives here. And if you don't like something, he paused, choosing the most painful words. Then you can go back to your country town with your parents. Maybe you'll be more comfortable there. He said it. He actually said it. The air in the room froze. Maya stared at him with wide-open eyes. She no longer felt pain, only cold, an all-consuming Arctic cold. In that moment her marriage ended, not legally but factually. The man standing before her was an absolute stranger, an enemy. She looked at his face, distorted with malice, and didn't recognize the boy she had fallen in love with, the one who carried her, gave her silly bouquets of daisies, and promised to be there for her through thick and thin. The thin times had arrived, but he was not with her. She slowly took a step back. I understand you, she said in an utterly colorless voice. And in that voice there was no longer any love or resentment, only emptiness. She turned and walked to the kitchen, sat down at her beautiful festive table, and began to wait. To wait for her parents, to wait for the final act of this play. She wasn't afraid anymore. She knew the worst had already happened. Precisely at 3 o'clock the doorbell rang. Short and delicate. It was them. Maya didn't flinch. She sat motionless like a statue. She heard Devon go to open the door. She heard her mother's and father's muffled, happy voices in the hall. She heard Miss Vivian come out of the room and quickly whisper something into her son's ear as he let the guests into the entrance. The final instruction before the battle. Maya didn't move. She waited for the line that was bound to come. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in dramatic crimson tones. A very suitable backdrop for the finale. Her entire past life, her love and her hopes, was burning out there in that sunset sky. And ahead was the unknown, cold and terrifying, yet strangely offering a faint hope of freedom. She straightened her back. So be it. She was ready. The air in the hallway, already stale and cramped, instantly thickened, turning into a viscous, oppressive mass. Her mother, Mrs. Lena Calloway's joyful exclamation got stuck somewhere in her throat, unable to fully form. Lena, rosy-cheeked and happy a second ago, froze on the threshold. Her smile slowly melted from her face like snow. She looked at her sullen, tense son-in-law, then at the thin figure in the flowered housecoat peeking out from behind his shoulder, and her eyes as clear and blue as Maya's filled with confusion. Mr. Marcus Calloway, Maya's father, a large, calm man with the broad palms of a working man, put down a heavy bag of sweet potatoes and a large cooler that smelled appealingly of smoked pork and country apples. He straightened up, and his height seemed to fill the entire space of the tiny hallway. He looked at his son-in-law in silence, waiting. Maya sat on her stool in the kitchen as if on a scaffold. She couldn't see, but she heard and felt everything. Every creak, every whisper, every lingering pause. She knew this script. She had written it herself with her patience, her obedience, and her naive faith in the best. The silence in the hallway was like the calm before an artillery barrage. Now she saw it with her inner eye. Vivian, like a conductor, made a barely perceptible nod. Her lips moved, delivering the final toxic instruction. And Devon, her obedient instrument, her faithful puppy, tensed, ready to perform his part. And he performed. Devon's voice, loud, irritated, and wound up to the limit by his mother's whispers, tore through the silence like a gunshot in an enclosed space. What do you want? My mama warned me that after the wedding, your country relatives would start showing up asking for money. The words crude, rude, and unfair hit everyone at once. Lena Calloway recoiled as if struck physically. Her hand flew to her mouth, and her eyes glistened with tears of humiliation. She stumbled backward, bumping against the doorframe. The bag of canned goods and pickled vegetables she held tilted dangerously. She had come to visit her only daughter, bringing her the very best, the most delicious things, and she was immediately covered in dirt, accused of begging. Maya froze. The world stopped. Sound vanished, replaced by a deafening ringing in her ears. She saw in slow motion her mother's face turning white, distorted by pain. She saw her father's face bewildered and then slowly turning to stone. She saw the triumphant malicious smirk that flashed across Miss Vivian's face before she managed to pull on her mask of a mournful sufferer again. And she saw her husband Devon, his face crimson with anger, proud of himself, confident in his righteousness, in his power. He showed who was boss. He protected his mother and his territory from the country relatives. Maya felt an icy coldness gripping her from the inside. This was not just an end. It was a public disavowal. He had just disavowed her, her family, and everything that connected them right in front of her parents. The air in the hallway rang with silence. Felt like an eternity. Devon, meeting no resistance, straightened up smugly, expecting the relatives to now stammer out apologies and retreat. He was already preparing for the next phase to generously allow them to enter, thereby demonstrating his authority and condescension. But then something happened that no one expected. Mr. Marcus Calloway, her father, who had stood still until this moment, like a granite rock, suddenly, very slowly, began unbuttoning his heavy woolen coat. It was a simple, mundane action, but it contained so much restrained dignity and icy calm that it commanded attention. He wasn't looking at Devon. His gaze, heavy and attentive, was fixed somewhere deeper inside the condo. He undid the last button calmly, without haste, and removed the heavy coat. Instead of humbly setting it down somewhere near the bags, as Devon expected, Marcus took a step forward, silently circled the bewildered son-in-law, and carefully hung the coat on the hook of the rack like an owner, like someone who belonged there. The hallway grew even quieter. Even Miss Vivian stopped breathing. Devon turned around confused, unable to comprehend what was happening. This quiet, calm man did not fit his script. He was supposed to be scared, to shrink, to start apologizing, but he was hanging up his coat. Marcus Calloway turned around. He looked Devon straight in the eyes with a gaze that sent a chill down Mia's spine. The look of a man who had worked with his hands all his life and knew the price of things, words, and people. Then his gaze slid past Devon's back and fixed on Miss Vivian's pale face, smugly lurking behind her son, and he spoke quietly, clearly, without a trace of anger, in a voice that was scarier than any shout. I actually bought this condo for my daughter. So why is some parasite taking up space in it? The word parasite, uttered softly but with devastating accuracy, hit the target precisely. It was so humiliating, so contemptuous, and so unexpected that Miss Vivian's face twisted. The mask of the righteous sufferer cracked and crumbled, exposing an ugly grimace of malice and fear. She opened her mouth to screech a rebuttal, but couldn't make a sound. Devon flinched as if he had been struck. What? How dare you? My mother, he began, choking on indignation. But what her father did next made Maya not just cover her mouth with her hand, but dig her fingers into her lips to keep from screaming. Marcus Calloway, not even granting his son-in-law a glance, took 2 more calm steps down the hall. He stopped at the wall next to the entrance door where a white plastic electrical panel was located beneath a small mirror. He wasn't searching for it. He knew exactly where it was, as if he had been there hundreds of times and installed it himself. He hooked a finger under the small door and opened it. Inside, rows of gray and black circuit breakers were visible. Without hesitating for a second, he found the largest main switch and pulled it down with a sharp, dry click. In the same second, the condo plunged into absolute impenetrable darkness and deafening silence. The light in the hallway went out. The droning television in the room fell silent, and the refrigerator in the kitchen stopped humming. The world narrowed to a patch of dim light falling from the open lobby door in which 4 dark silhouettes were frozen. The silence was broken by only one sound. Miss Vivian's high-pitched screeching cry full of animal terror. "Ah, the light! What happened, Devon?" In that gloom, in that suddenly dead silence, her father's voice sounded even weightier, calmer, and more inexorable. "The contract for electricity supply to this condo is in my name, Marcus Calloway," he said in an even tone, speaking into the darkness toward the frozen figures of Devon and his mother, "as is the deed of gift, stating that the principal capital for the purchase of this property was provided to my daughter Maya Calloway, now Maya Reed by marriage." He paused, letting every word soak into the consciousness of the stunned listeners. "Daughter." He turned his head toward the kitchen, where her silhouette was barely discernible in the darkness. "Gather your necessities. You're coming with us." Then he turned back to the dark figures in the center of the hallway. "And you?" His voice became hard as metal. "I give you 24 hours to gather your things and vacate my daughter's condo. Exactly 1 day from now, I will return and change the locks, and if you have not cleared out by then, I will not turn the power back on, and other people will be here to remove you. Is that clear?" A dead silence followed. Devon mumbled something incoherent. "How? On what grounds? This is our condo. We're on the deed." His voice sounded pathetic and uncertain. All his feigned arrogance, all his proprietary confidence had evaporated in the darkness, having collided with her father's quiet, unbreakable force. He turned confusedly to his mother, seeking support, advice, salvation. And Maya, watching that gesture, the sight of her husband, her grown 32-year-old man instinctively seeking protection from his mother in a crisis. A mother who herself was trembling with fear and malice, finally understood everything. He was not her rock. He never had been and never would be. He was an appendage to his mother, her shadow, her weapon. And now that the main puppeteer was frightened and humiliated, the puppet hung helplessly on its strings. Her marriage was not just a mistake. It was a fiction, a deception she had fabricated for herself. And now, in this darkness, illuminated only by the faint light from the lobby, she saw everything with painful clarity. "Mom, Dad, please wait for me in the car," her own voice said, surprisingly firm and calm. "I just need 5 minutes." Her mother, still standing by the door, nodded silently and took her husband's arm. Her father gave Maya one short, understanding look, retrieved his coat from the rack, and walked out onto the landing. As she left, Lena Calloway couldn't resist throwing one last phrase into the darkness toward Miss Vivian, quiet and full of contempt. "You snake." The door closed behind them, and the condo grew even darker. Only a faint glow from the kitchen window remained. Maya walked past the frozen Devon and Miss Vivian as if they were ghosts. She didn't look at them. They had ceased to exist for her. She walked into her bedroom corner, found her backpack by the light of her phone screen and quickly, but without haste, threw in the essentials: her passport, laptop, chargers, makeup bag, and a change of clothes. "Where are you going?" Devon finally choked out, following her. His voice was trembling. Maya didn't answer. She continued methodically packing. "Maya, wait. Your father, he was just heated. That's illegal. We'll talk." He tried to take her hand. She snatched her arm away as if from fire and looked at him in the dim light of the phone. Her eyes looked like black pits. "All conversation ended, Devon," she said coldly. "Out there in the hallway when you insulted my parents, when you disavowed me." "I didn't disavow you. She pushed me." "You pushed me." He started to wind up again, but it was the hysteria of weakness, not strength. "You were always against my mother. I had to protect her. You should have protected your wife." Maya cut him off. "But you chose. Now live with your choice in the dark." She zipped up the backpack and walked toward the exit. Ms. Vivian blocked her path. Even in the dark, it was visible how she was shaking with malice. "You ungrateful wretch," she hissed. "We took you in and you think we're moving out? Never. This is our Devon's condo too. We'll sue." Maya stopped and looked her straight in the eye. "Go ahead and sue, but you'll have to sue in the dark and without hot water. The water heater, don't forget, is electric too." She walked around her and opened the entrance door. Bright light from the staircase hit her eyes. Before stepping out, she turned back. They stood in the middle of the dark corridor. Two pathetic, bewildered shadows, mother and son. A losing team. 24 hours, Devon, Maya said from the doorway and closed the door behind her. They spent the night at Mia's Aunt Carol's house, her mother's sister, who lived on the other side of Atlanta. Mia slept on the living room sofa covered with a warm throw. She didn't cry. Inside it was quiet and empty. In the morning, while everyone was still asleep, she sat in the kitchen with her father. He quietly drank his coffee, looking out the window. "Dad," she began softly, "is it true about the electricity contract?" Her father smiled into his mustache. "Is it true?" he replied. "When we gave you the money for the down payment, I immediately took precautions just in case. I talked to a lawyer. He advised two things. First, formalize the money transfer not just as a gift, but as a deed of gift for a targeted purchase. That's in case of divorce. So your share is undisputed. And second, he took a sip of coffee. I requested that when signing the contract with the builder, all utility contracts for electricity and water be temporarily put in my name. I said the daughter doesn't know how to handle things. I'll help at first. The intention, of course, was for you two to transfer everything to yourselves later, but somehow you never got around to it, and thank goodness." He looked at her with his clear eyes. 6 months ago, when you first complained about her, I knew this wouldn't end well. People like her, Maya, they're like a cancer. If you don't cut them out immediately, they'll devour everything around them. I waited for you to realize it yourself. Yesterday, from your voice on the phone, I knew the time had come. Exactly at 3 o'clock that afternoon, the three of them drove up to the building. Maya, her father, and 2 strong men her father introduced as helpers. Maya's heart jumped, but her father reassured her. They're locksmiths to change the locks. No violence, daughter. Everything by the book. They went up to the floor. The condo door was slightly ajar. Inside they heard some bustling. When they entered, they saw the following scene. Devon and Miss Vivian were hurrying amidst a room cluttered with boxes and bundles. Devon, pale with eyes red from a sleepless night, was trying to stuff a computer monitor into a box. Miss Vivian, already dressed in a gray coat with a scarf on her head, was frantically cramming small junk into bags. The condo was in utter disarray. The sunlight flooding the room ruthlessly highlighted the dust, the scattered belongings, and the general atmosphere of hasty flight. At their appearance, Devon straightened up. "We are just leaving," he announced defiantly. "Don't worry, we won't stay in your palace a minute longer. You can choke on your condo." "Very good," Marcus Calloway replied calmly. "We'll wait in the hall." They stepped out onto the landing. 15 minutes later, the last boxes were carried out. Miss Vivian, passing by, cast a look of such fierce hatred at Maya that she instinctively flinched. Devon walked out last, dragging a large suitcase. He stopped in front of Maya. "I'm filing for divorce," he said dully. "File it," she replied just as quietly. He stood for another second, apparently expecting some other reaction, but finding none, turned and walked towards the elevator where his mother was already waiting. The elevator doors closed, carrying them down out of her life. Maya walked into the condo, her condo. It was empty and echoing. Some papers and scraps of tape lay on the floor. The air smelled of dust and other people's sweat. Her father, meanwhile, was already conferring with the locksmiths, who set to work with a businesslike air. Mrs. Lena Calloway, putting on gloves she had brought from home, opened all the windows wide. "All right, daughter. First things first, a deep clean. We need to air out and wash away all this filth," she said briskly, and they set to work. Maya washed the floors, wiped away dust, and sorted through the remaining clutter. Together with her mother, they carried out the old air mattress she had slept on for the past few months. They threw out the mother-in-law's old slippers, her greasy housecoat forgotten in the bathroom. Every cleaned inch, every thrown-out item felt like an act of cleansing, an exorcism of evil from her home. Her father, meanwhile, drove to the utility company and finalized the transfer of the electricity contract into her name. That evening, when the new locks were installed and the condo was sparkling clean, they sat in the kitchen drinking tea with the same sweet potato pie her aunt had baked. "Well," her father said, surveying the kitchen, "now this is your home, daughter. Truly yours." Her parents left 2 days later. Maya remained alone. For the first few days, the silence was deafening. She walked through the empty condo, Getting used to it again. Getting used to being able to sleep on the sofa in the living room, not in the kitchen. Getting used to being able to leave an unfinished sandwich on the table without being called a slob. Getting used to being able to buy gorgonzola and eat it to her heart's content. These were simple, small joys that now seemed like the highest degree of freedom. The divorce was quick and quiet. Devon didn't appear at the hearing, sending his representative instead. They did not divide the condo. The deed of gift presented by Mia's lawyer resolved all issues. The mortgage payments they had made together were recognized as joint debt during the marriage period, and Mia simply paid Devon back his half of the installments, a ridiculous amount compared to the value of the property. Ms. Vivian, as later revealed through mutual acquaintances, never bought any condo in Stockbridge. She returned to her old two-bedroom place in the distant town, which she had never intended to leave, and now told all her neighbors what a snake her daughter-in-law was, taking away the condo her poor son had bought with his hard-earned money. Devon moved in with her. 6 months passed. It was a warm spring evening. Mia returned home from work tired but content. She had received a promotion. Her project was recognized as the best in the department. She entered her quiet, clean condo. A bouquet of fresh tulips she had bought for herself just because was sitting on the kitchen counter. She changed clothes, brewed herself some herbal tea, grabbed her mug and walked out onto the balcony. The city below lived its own life, illuminated by millions of lights. In her former life, those lights had seemed cold and alien. Now they were just lights. She took a sip of the hot, fragrant tea and looked at the sunset sky. The pain was gone, leaving behind a thin, barely visible scar. A reminder that freedom sometimes comes at a very high price. But it was worth it. She was home alone and for the first time in a long time completely